friend of mine had, told me about this thing called about climate change. And frankly, before that, I really didn't know anything about the Kyoto Protocol or climate change. And it was kind of interesting. And so I started to attend conferences around the world and just learning and absorbing. And I thought, hey, I can't tell you for true whether climate change, where man-made, pollution is causing climate change or not. But I'm going to choose to believe in it. And I believe, there's a better way of doing living our lives or building out our cities. And the other thing about that really kind of struck me was this thing about, the rapid global urbanization. And these are, buzzwords that we see in many PowerPoint presentations. And then when you look into that, the UN is saying that there are 1.5 million people moving into cities to live, to work every week. 1.5 million is the size of some, bigger than some small cities. And that's the amount of people that are migrating into the cities every single week. And over half of that is obviously here in Asia. So, and in overcrowded cities, polluted, congested. So how do we deal with this influx of people? The housing, the jobs, the pollution, the water, the food, the energy. So it's a big challenge to accommodate these people looking for better lives in the big cities.
Christine here with another fun, exciting episode of the Co-Living Coach Show every single Wednesday on YouTube, on Spotify, SoundCloud, and iTunes. And if you guys can write us a super quick review, we'd really appreciate it. And I want to give ISL Furnishings a quick shout out. They are a brand created through Inner Space Living, and they are all about creating exciting spaces where design meets function. Interspace parlayed its success in commercial grade unit furniture and conceived an elevated offering. And they believe strongly in the co-living industry, which is really cool. And they already work with some of the larger companies like Star City. ISL Furnishings was founded with the mission to bring your brand to life. Their goal is to revolutionize the unit furniture experience, and they are driven by creativity. They believe that interiors should inspire brilliance. Every venue has its own voice. They exist to clarify that voice, interpret your brand vision, and deliver superior quality on time, every time, even during COVID. We actually interviewed the guys a while back, so you definitely want to check out that interview. And this week we are going into smart cities. Again, I love to bring people on that kind of come from a different aspect of real estate and co-living. So we definitely still talk about co-living, but we go deep into smart cities, net zero carbon cities. We go really deep into that stuff. He's very passionate about that. We are bringing on this week Chang Ha. He is with Reimagining Cities Foundation. He's a co-founder. And we talk about the key to smart city success. He's been in this world for 12 years. He has 20 years background in finance. And it's exciting to see what could be possible in the future with net zero carbon cities. And obviously construction and housing plays a significant role in how much carbon is produced. This week, we are bringing on Chang Ha. He is with Reimagining Cities Foundation. We're going to his background's in finance, like I read in his bio, but he's definitely spent about 10 years in this world. We're going to talk about net zero cities, which is really cool. So welcome to the show this week.
Thank you very much, Christine.
Okay, so let's start. Let's go 10 years back. How did you get started?
Wow, 10 years back, I guess, well, my background is a little bit over 20 years in finance. And 20 years back, I just completed my last part of being working for Lone Star Real Estate Funds here in Korea. I was the CEO of their Korea operations. And then started to kind of want something different other than finance, money, and then looked into sustainability. And been in sustainability smart cities for now 12 years. And I founded a small foundation called Reimagining Cities, and I'm the co-founder and CTO.
Nice. So what, obviously you're passionate about that. Like what 12 years ago, what made you, kind of switch gears over to that side other than, finance is all about money. This is definitely making a big impact in the world.
Yeah, I think a friend of mine had, told me about this thing called about climate change. And frankly, before that, I really didn't know anything about the Kyoto Protocol or climate change. And it was kind of interesting. And so I started to attend conferences around the world and just learning and absorbing. And I thought, hey, I can't tell you for true whether climate change, man-made, pollution is causing climate change or not, but I'm going to choose to believe in it. And I believe, there's a better way of doing, living our lives or building out our cities. And the other thing about that really kind of struck me was this thing about, the rapid global urbanization. And these are, buzzwords that we see in many PowerPoint presentations. And then when you look into that, the UN is saying that there are 1.5 million people moving into cities to live, to work every week. 1.5 million is the size of some, bigger than some small cities. And that's the amount of people that are migrating into the cities every single week. And over half of that is obviously here in Asia. So, and in overcrowded cities, polluted, congested. So how do we deal with this influx of people? The housing, the jobs, the pollution, the water, the food, the energy. So it's a big challenge to accommodate these people looking for better lives in the big cities.
And that 1.5 million each week, that's the same number even during COVID? Because I know a lot of people started, fleeing out of those big cities to the
Yeah,
countryside. So is that number
yeah.
still relevant?
Well, I don't know the updates because COVID is such a recent phenomenon. It started 1 year ago, really impacting our lives in a serious way. This data comes from the United Nations from several years back, and they're saying that from the year 2015 to 2030, in this 15-year period, and that's the 15-year period of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, right? 2016 to 2030. And they were saying, hey, we're 7 billion people now, 9 billion in 2050. And then when you do the math, that equates to 1.5 million people about a week moving into the cities.
That's so crazy. And then this is
It is crazy.
yeah, what are some of the key points of the UN sustainability goals that they have?
Well, they have, before that, they had a 15-year period called Millennial Development Goals, and that was, 2000 to 2015. And then the next 15-year period, sustainable, the SDGs, they call it, they have 17 of those. So they have things like no poverty, gender equality, sanitation, and the part that we like is number 11, which is for smart, sustainable communities. Yeah.
And let's dive in. Smart cities is another buzzword, as you know.
Yes, yes.
I would love to hear kind of your definition and your breakdown.
Yeah, I'm in smart cities for about 12 years now, and it's a big, complex thing. And then if you talk about smart cities, someone will say it's not about the technology, it's about the people. And then someone will say, well, it's not smart cities, Cha, it's sustainable cities. Or, hey, Cha, you got it all wrong. It's more important for resilient cities. And now recently, everyone's embracing carbon neutral by 2050 goals. So now it's net zero carbon cities. So we have these different definitions popping up over the last 10, 15 years. And I think they're converging into basically the similar things. It's for the people, right? We want to make better lives, living conditions for our people. It's about the environment. And it's also about fighting climate change as we build out our cities, right?
Yeah,
I think
and then
40% of global carbon emissions are coming from the building sector.
okay,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
construction. No, I've
so
heard the same.
Yeah, so that's the sector that we focus on. Another third would be coming from transportation, all the buses and cars and ships and planes going to and fro around the world. And the other third would be from industry, cooking steel and cement and things like that.
And then what's it going to take for a city to get to that, net zero carbon? Like, what is it going to take? Has there been any
Yeah.
cities that have accomplished that yet?
Well, I'll take the last question first. Any cities that have accomplished it? No, but there are some cities stepping up, and the one that I like is Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, several years ago, I'd say maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, said we want to be carbon neutral by 2025. That is one of the most aggressive dates. So they are trying to continue economic growth and decouple, drive down carbon emissions and pollution while growing their economy. So now with there's a big campaign, Race to Zero, and 450 cities are embracing carbon neutral goals by 2050 or earlier. So these are all good developments. What's it going to take? Oh my God, many different ways. But I love the recent publication by the World Economic Forum. It's called Net Zero Carbon Cities, an Integrated Approach. So it came out just last month, and they're saying you need more efficient buildings, you need clean energy infrastructure or smart energy infrastructure, and a conversion to electrification of everything, all the energy that we need.
Nice. And then with the construction stuff, like you said, it's a big chunk of that. How do you offset that?
Well, what we're professing is not just going for carbon offsets, meaning, oh, we have, is our portfolio of 200 buildings. They're all, energy hogs, and they're using electricity primarily from burning coal somewhere, spewing out greenhouse gases to supply our energy, electricity to turn on air conditioning all day long. And oh, by the way, we buy carbon offsets. So we're making investments in solar and wind energy to offset this. So is that really going to get us to where we need to be to fight this climate change? And some experts are saying, no, you don't want to do that. You want to drive down, make these buildings a little bit more efficient, and then supply it with clean energy. So it's a dual strategy, so to speak.
And that leads to my next question is the carbon credits. Sometimes people take a flight, somebody's going to take a flight across the US or wherever, and they'll buy those carbon credits. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I've studied carbon credits back 10 years ago with the EU ETS, emissions trading scheme. It's a way, it's a system. I'm not really for that. But if it does expedite or accelerate the investments in clean energy or forest lands, things that countermeasure the negative impacts of greenhouse gases, that's great. Carbon credits is just an instrument that people like to trade. And the key thing is, what's the price of the carbon credit? So if it's too cheap, then no one's really motivated to put their money behind those things. It's got to be expensive. Penalties if you don't achieve your goals.
Yeah. And then are there cities that you're researching? So Copenhagen's one that's kind of on its way. And yeah, I've heard tons of great stuff about what the work they're doing. Are there any other cities that you've studied lately that are kind of pushing the envelope and getting, working on it too? Any city in the world?
There's a lot, in the States you have, even New York, they're trying to do goals of reducing 80% of their greenhouse gases by 2050. There's San Francisco working on, zero waste, avoiding things going to the, there are pockets of, like I said, this race to zero, which is a campaign by the United Nations, 450 cities are embracing carbon neutrality. So they're approaching it, and they're all in different phases. I would say most of them are in their early phase. And what we profess as Reimagining Cities is let's measure it real time, right? So why don't we get the data of all the energy usage in our buildings and put it up onto the cloud? And if people are embarrassed with their terrible performance of their buildings, allow them to put it up anonymously. But we should be collecting this real time and studying that and enable people to access that and say, well, how is my building performing to the rest of the population? Oh my God, I'm doing terribly. So you can make games out of it or make a community of learning as to how some of the leaders are doing it.
And then speaking of smart, I'm sure you've researched it a ton in Toronto. Again, going back to the smart cities site, and it reminded me because you were talking about data collection in the cloud, and so it's Sidewalk Labs. So did you study that project? Obviously they shut it down, unfortunately, but
yes. Oh, well, I followed that rigorously. I loved the concept of Sidewalk Labs. I loved the idea of technology and urbanism and converging that to create a better way of living. And I think it's only through the data and technology that we can do more things with less, right? Unfortunately, they pulled the plug. There are many reasons people talk about. One of it was data privacy. They didn't like Google, a big data company, to be collecting data on my personal affairs, right? And it was a shame. There should have been more, conversations and multi-stakeholder engagement about that. I attended one of the public hearings. In fact, I attended the last one before they pulled out. I was in Toronto for a bit. That was my last business trip before the COVID. And because we're working on a project called Lakeview Village, which is a $6 billion mixed-use development in Mississauga, the town next to Toronto. And they have carbon neutral ambitions. But the last public hearing was February 29th. And I found that very unusual because it was a leap year, February 29th. And I said, wow, this is cool. So I extended my stay for a couple of days to be able to attend that. And you would not have expected that they would pull the plug. I thought there were hundreds of people there. And the discussions were relatively pretty smooth. So I thought, oh, they're starting to get things under control here. And I was very hopeful that it would proceed, but no go.
it was actual hearing. Like, what were some points being made by the opposing side?
A lot of that was on the data privacy, right? But Sidewalk Labs was presenting, they had a 1,500 page document that they put on their website. So for people to see and learn about all the different types of technologies that they're considering to put in. Some were too expensive, some they wanted to go ahead with. The other pushback was this initial Sidewalk Lab site was on a 12-acre site. And then during this process, Sidewalk Lab said, well, this concept would be really cool for the entire Portlands, which is this 800-acre site adjacent to the 12 acres. Yeah.
And waterfront too, right? Waterfront?
Yeah, well, all waterfront. And I think that took people by surprise, saying, hey, it's 12 acres, and what are you all of a sudden talking about 800 acres? So I think it was the data privacy piece that really, there were some local Torontonians that really pushed back hard on that.
That's so interesting because that's going to be the future anyways. So I'm surprised they would, kind of push it out. Because do you see, how would they make, other than anonymously loading the data, how else are we going to get around, people feeling comfortable with the privacy stuff?
Mm. Well, I follow Sidewalk Labs even now, what, right? And after they pulled out, now the same people or the Torontonians are saying, oh, we should get data. They wanted to embrace some of the ideas that Sidewalk Labs is proposing. Now that they've left, they said, well, it wasn't that bad of an idea after all. On the data privacy, my thing is, you have to figure out with the government, the citizens, academia, as to what is the governance of the data, right? And who owns the data. And I think is to get it started, don't just say data, 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 but what kind of data? Mm. And for us, if you wanted to manage carbon neutrality, we need to measure the amount of energy that's being used by every building. And by understanding what energy is being used on the first floor, second floor, of every building, with that information, we're able to make remedies to drive that down, right? Mm-hmm. So I always say, if you want to manage it, you have to measure it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Famous Peter Drucker, MIT professor, said, hey, if you want to manage something, you better manage it. You better measure it.
Very true. I've heard that quote a few times. And so when is your project launching over there? When does it launch?
Oh, you mean Lakeview Village?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I'm just like a sustainability advisor, trying to help them. How do you do greener and smarter developments without over-investing? And do it in phases so that you can get it very close to carbon neutrality, right? And then after you complete it, and over time, as technologies become cheaper, then you can easily adopt and plug in those technologies to get it to carbon neutrality. The master plan was endorsed back in 2019, end of 2019. So this year we're preparing as to what first phase should be built. And for me, we're doing energy modeling and simulation with a local team of engineers and consultants to see how can we drive down energy through passive design strategies, right? Which is the cheaper way of approaching it.
Nice. And then I did say before we got started, we're going to talk a little bit about co-living, and just a little bit, just the sustainability factor and the shared living space, and sharing, putting more people sharing, a smaller footprint in a building. So yeah, just would love to hear your thoughts on co-living.
Well, kudos to you for writing a beautiful book on co-living and creating this community to push that agenda forward. Co-living, I think, for me, I've spoken to several developers who are doing co-living concepts. For me, I think I like the application of co-living toward affordable housing. So the units themselves may be a little bit smaller, right? But you still have all the amenities that you need. You have your bed, you have a desk, you have a kitchenette, a living room, whatever size fits that your particular family. But it's you also have this common space, right? Maybe the roof is open to all of the residents. You can bring your friends and hang out there. It's well connected. You can work there. Just get out of your room, get some sanity. But also built in is some sharing concepts, right? So some of the bike sharing is an easy one, but there are other things that you can share to kind of build community, right? And then not just in one location, but let's say you had 10 locations or 50 locations around the world, and you're building communities around that and learning from each other and seeding, interesting ideas that have been developed in one location and kind of spreading that out and seeing how the other communities like that. I just love the concept. I would live in one of those, developments. So if you have 10,000 apartments that you're building, 20% maybe needs to be affordable housing. Can you, have a concept of co-living residential units? And there is a concept by IKEA, the Swedish company. It's called Urban Village Project. And they had this kind of cool, affordable, sustainable, livable sharing. And the architect was Danish, called Effect. Just had a call with him last week, actually.
Oh,
And
cool.
that
I've
would
heard
be
of
a
him.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a very cool concept to, embrace co-living and kind of deploy them in the thousands. We're not talking about, 10 units here, 50 units here. It's like rolling it out in a big scale. That would be really cool.
No, and I loved what you said too about the sharing, items. So you're in a
Mm,
building, not every single person needs to have a surfboard and a bicycle. And, there can be an app that,
mhm,
listing, who has what in the building and see if you
mm,
could just trade it, borrow it, whatever.
mhm.
It
Yes.
saves on storage. It saves on, not everybody needs all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you look at even home appliances, the mixer or the baking, things, air fryers. I don't know. We don't use them every day, and if you open up your cupboard, they're there for a long time. They're there more than you're actually using it. So if you had a common area where you can sign up and use it for an hour or two, right? Bring it and then clean it up and then bring it back. That's pretty cool. And sharing economy here in Korea, they even have sharing economy for luxury bags.
Oh,
Yeah, so you could rent out, an Hermes bag for 3 days for $100 or something like this.
oh yeah,
Very
no, we have
great.
something. Yeah, we've rent the
Yeah.
runway here in the States. Yeah, so you can rent
Yeah,
like
yeah,
designer
yeah,
dresses and bags and purses. Oh, that's funny.
yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
That's a sharing economy.
Well, we're kind of diverging from the area that I hold my passion, which is carbon neutral developments, real estate. How can we build buildings better
Hmm.
and decarbonizing the buildings in existing large portfolios, as well as low carbon real estate developments going forward.
And then that was my next and last question for you. Where do you see that if we fast forward 10 years? So we're not going to
Mhm.
go to 2050, but where do you see it in
Right.
10 years?
Well, Asia is one market. Again, I'll refer to the UN, that rapid urbanization, right? So what they came up with data saying that during that 15-year period, we need to build 92 billion square meters. And you say, well, what does that mean, 92 billion square meters? And someone said that's building all of London every month.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, every month that amount of square footage is being built around the world. And again, half of that is in Asia, right? So we're building the size of London every 2 months because, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the current building codes are not very energy efficient. They're not considering carbon, measuring the carbon. So we're building very energy inefficient. They look really good. We got marble on, it's shiny, and lobbies are like, very cool looking, but they're very energy inefficient, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the building materials that we use, or even in the United States, they're not very healthy. They contain these elements of formaldehyde and VOCs, and that's hazardous to our health.
For
So we got to
sure.
yeah, we got to change that, right?
Well, that's why you have the foundation, right?
Yeah, well, we're kind of trying to drum up, large institutions like Urban Land Institute.
Mhm.
The big developers there, they are embracing carbon neutrality, health and well-being within the built environment. GRES, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. There are a lot of large companies out there who are starting to embrace this. So this is really great. For us, we just try to help measure onto the cloud. And that's why we love digital twins as an enabler for sustainability and smarter cities.
Well, awesome. Well, this has been fun. We had Julian on a
Yes.
couple weeks ago to talk about smart cities. So it's kind of cool to just kind of mix up the conversation. It all ties together, obviously. It's the future of living.
Yes, a future of co-living, I should add.
Yes, living and co-living and sustainability. So excited to see what the future holds for all of that. And thanks again for coming on the show this week.
Thank you. And it was so nice to have this chance to chat with you, learn together.
Definitely. Awesome. Okay. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. And keep in mind, we are on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and iTunes. And also, if you are a co-living community, you can reach out to us to be listed on the Kindred platform. That's KNDRD.io. It's a great way to showcase pictures, videos, virtual tours of your community. Also, we have a link in the show notes for our 3 books on co-living. You can also find one of them on Amazon.com if you'd like the print version. And lastly, a very quick shout out to our partners over at ISL Furnishings. They bring light to your vision and already work with some of the larger companies like Star City and Quarters. See you guys next week.